Good evening, how are you? It's Jules Wyman here from juleswyman.com, and I am, those of you who watch this at on the recordings, I'm hoping that you know that you can skip ahead to these little opening sequences when I'm fiddling around making sure that everything is working and that I am live and that people can see that, and also doing what I would invite you to do as well, which is share this. So I'm just going to share this to my other page as well and say, hey, we've gone live. Here we go. Hey Caroline, how are you, my lovely? Nice to see you. Oh, Facebook have changed their algorithm again. I can now like you in a much easier way, or like your comments. So come and join the conversation. Come and join. It would be much easier if I hadn't decided to start typing this with a cup of tea in one hand and trying to look at the camera as well. It's not always a good thing. So, for those of you who are joining, welcome. And I probably am going to be hugging this quite tightly. It's very, very cold here in the UK. Hey Jules. Hey Shelley, I read your comment and then said, hey Jules. It's very cold here in the UK. I'm particularly cold. Haven't quite warmed up yet today after having spent a magnificent week in Spain last week, at the Detoxed retreat where I was the guest coach, can't even speak, guest coach for the week, doing the theme of confidence, the topic that I love to talk about. For those of you who know me and know how passionate I get about things, having the opportunity to share that with a new group of people for the week and then work with them one-on-one was amazing. And yet coming back from the temperatures over in southern Spain to northern England has been a bit of a body shock, to say the least. So I hope that wherever you are in the world, you are nice and lovely and snuggly and warm. So I am just giving Facebook a bit of time to let you know that this has gone live and it being shared. And whilst it's playing catch up, I'll just go through the usual. My gosh, my brain really has decided to dip in and out this evening. I maybe needed to have had a warmer drink earlier on to defrost it. I'll go through the usual kind of housekeeping rules, and my intent for doing this Facebook Live every Monday night, as you can see from the description, this is like the 101st episode, 101. And there was loads of jokes I was making in my head earlier about 101 and what I could do about 101, and then realised there's too many different connotations in different countries and just thought it's not worth the hassle. So that is why I stuck with the theme, a very basic, broad term of just saying relationships. So my intent behind these conversations has always been to have a conversation with you, find out where you're at if you want to join in the conversation, and share with you any thoughts, insights, exercises, teachers, books, courses, questionnaires, whatever it may be that I have found useful on my own journey over the last 15, 20-ish years. And also to do whatever I can to support you from where you're at, give you the opportunity to ask those questions so that I can plant those seeds for you, hence the confidence garden, but plants those seeds so that they've got the opportunity to grow, to develop into something and be that of value for yourself. And I know that because I've had some really lovely emails over the last few months of people saying that just by watching the videos that they've made some significant changes. So that's fantastic in and of itself. You know, people going for job interviews and applying for things that they wouldn't have done before, having different conversations with people, challenging themselves, just all sorts of things. It never fails to amaze me, basically. So that's my intent for these is to support you with wherever you are at, and share some things that have made a difference for me. So on the whole sharing is caring side of things, remember that you can share the video in the same way that you would do with anything else on Facebook, hitting the share button below and posting it to your own page. Equally, you can, if there's something that comes up and you think, oh, I wish so-and-so was listening to this or watching this, you can tag them below, again, in exactly the same way that you would do for anything on Facebook. So as we go through the conversation, what is really helpful for me is if things resonate. Well, first of all, for those of you that are joining, do drop down and say hi, like Caroline and Shelley have done, because it is lovely for me to be able to just give you a shout out. You don't have to join any further in the conversation if you don't want to, but it is lovely when people do. But it is great as we go through the conversation, if things resonate with you, if they're making sense for you, then give me a thumbs up, because obviously if I was in the room with you and we were having a group kind of workshop, then I would be checking in with you and getting feedback as to whether things were making sense. And obviously if they do, it's always great to know, so you can do some hearts or some likes, whatever. Don't know what that was meant to be, a heart I suppose. That's really helpful. But equally, if something doesn't make sense, then rather than do a different emoji, someone's been very quick there off the mark and doing some likes, thank you very much. But if something doesn't make sense, rather than doing a different emoji, let me know below and just say, sorry Jules, but this is not making sense, or I don't get it, or it doesn't resonate with my situation. And feel free to have that conversation, because I'm open to that. You have my permission to type in at any point. You don't have to wait for me to invite you. If you've got a question or a thought, or if something's really clicked for you, then type that in at any point. As I say, don't feel like you have to wait. And that goes the same for if it's on recordings. If you're watching this on a recording, then you can still join in just as much, still answer. Obviously, I won't be able to give you a live shout out. So if you're watching on the recording, hello, this is for you. But yeah, just join in exactly the same way, because I still get notifications that people have commented, seriously, what's going on with my brain? Defrost. And then I will reply. I will connect with you and reply. So I think that's kind of all of the housekeeping rules. I don't think there's anything else I've missed. I'm sure that Caroline and Shelley, who are very avid viewers and joining in pretty much every week, if there is anything that I've missed, feel free to pick me up on it. I don't actually have a little checklist that I go through. It's just this frozen brain that I'm asking to participate with it. So, relationships. As I think I said earlier on, the reason that I thought I'd bring this topic to the table, it's twofold really. One, because it's something that I work with people a lot on, and the conversation, it can be about somebody looking to be in relationship, somebody looking to be comfortable and confident with being not in a relationship. Obviously I'm talking about intimate relationship there with a significant other. It can be around relationships with people at work. It could be relationships to do with friends, family members. Relationships go across the board and come up in so many different guises. So I do spend a lot of time with clients looking at those different aspects and what it is that they want to get and how we can do things in a different way. Now, I'm making the assumption that there could be something awry with the internet connection. And the only reason I'm saying that is because I'm watching the numbers flitting up and then down quite quickly. So I'm just going to do a quick check here. Make sure everything is as per. Yeah, it seems to be working okay. Okay. So, I shall remove me. I don't want to be able to see me at the same time out the corner of my eye. It's funny enough looking at myself as it is. So that was one of the main reasons, because it's a topic that comes up so often in so many guises, and as I'm sure you can appreciate, it is a big and vast topic as well. And one of the things that I learned probably about 10 years ago now was somebody was doing some teachings around not necessarily the meaning of life, but what life is, and how I suppose it was about the meaning of life, but it was more to do with how everything, the root of everything that we do on a day-to-day basis is relationship. And that could be about how I relate to my cup of tea, through to how I relate to human beings, and other human beings, and who they are and their relevance within my life and how I interact with that. And it was something that I was contemplating a lot for myself in the last couple of weeks, but just with checking in as to how I was relating to things. And as you possibly know, and I shall put the link in actually, that body confidence is something that I also work with people on, and how we relate to our bodies is something that is important. And if you're in the York area, then I'm hosting a screening of the Embrace movie, which is being beautifully and kindly, generously hosted by York St John University. So book your tickets. I've just put the link in below for that. And again, how do we relate to our bodies? How does that show up? So it was something that I've been contemplating a lot in different guises, and that's why I wanted to bring it to the table. And I do have my own views and my own thoughts on it. But if you're watching this live, then my invitation, I can see that somebody's already put a question in, so I'll have a look at that in a moment. But if you're watching this live, what are the questions that you have around relationships? And you can be quite generic with it, or you can be specific. It's up to you. Because there's a relationships, that it's everywhere, isn't it? It's, how do you relate to the person that you sat next to on the plane, which is an experience that I had on the way home on Saturday. How do you relate to your siblings or your parents or grandparents or children or your work colleague? It can come up in so many different ways. So Shelley's put, I'm glad this is a topic. I have a question. I'm having a challenging time with my stepdaughter and was wondering how I could develop my relationship with her. That's a lovely topic, Shelley, and one that I have some experience with, having been a stepmom for a period of time. So I'm going to put a pin in that, a metaphorical pin in that, and come back to it, only because there are a few things that I want to share first, and some of these may be pertinent to that, and they may give you an opportunity to start to look at things in a different way. And I'll come back and answer that in a more specific way towards the end of the session as well. So Shelley's given us a beautiful way of looking at things, or starting things off. For those of you who are watching, feel free to type in your question at any point as to relationships, and let's have a conversation about it. So yeah. So one of the first things I think that's really important to look at where relationships are concerned is around expectations, and more specifically what our expectations are, and have we actually communicated that to the other person? Have we had a conversation around that? So I'll give you a very random expectation. I spend a lot of my day actually on my own, and because of that, my brain has come up with an expectation that other people should be quiet. It's an interesting expectation that this has created. And I only tend to notice it when I'm traveling a lot, because I notice how loud some of the people speak. And I can hear what my brain then starts to kick into of, don't they respect other people and da 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 da. And I start relating to that person who I don't even know in a probably quite a judgmental way. And I don't think that that is something that we do just with strangers. I think we do it with other people, and especially people that we work with on a day-to-day basis, people that we live with, people that we have strong connections with, be that family or friends. And we have these expectations, but very often we're not even really clear what they are for ourselves. And we're not always, we very rarely articulate those for somebody else, and they don't know that they've broken one of our expectations or not done one of our expectations until they get the wrath or the cold shoulder or the hump or however it may show up. So one of the things that I would encourage you to start looking at, and I would look at it in every aspect of relationships, is what is your expectation? What is your expectation of yourself? And what is your expectation of the other person? So, Shelley, I'll relate that back. What is your expectation of yourself in that role of stepmom? And what is your expectation of stepmoms in general? And equally, what's your expectation of stepdaughter and stepdaughters in general? So you've got 4 potential different angles of looking at that and starting to see if there are any clashes or whether there are any, because quite often our expectations are extremely high for ourselves or for other people. And as I say, and then we don't articulate them. We don't give each other that space to really understand and have that conversation. So that would be one of my first things to think about, is expectations. One of the next things I would encourage you to look at is, and this has come up, oh gosh, I don't know how many times in the last few months, and again in different guises, but it's a conversation that's happened a lot, is around boundaries. And I firmly believe that people treat you the way that you allow them to treat you. And if we don't set boundaries for ourselves and for them, in other words, what is acceptable and what's not acceptable, what's okay or what's not okay, and communicate that in a helpful way, not in a huffy way or an angry way, but in a helpful communication style, then we can start to recognize that is what our links in with our expectations as to what we will tolerate and what we won't tolerate. Because again, very often we assume that other people know what our boundaries are, because we have this fairly ridiculous, I think, notion that every person sees the world the way that we do. Bonkers. Even, and okay, we may not assume that everyone in the world, but we do assume. So like if we live in the same household, we assume that people have very similar boundaries and expectations. If we work in the same environment, we have that expectation. If we're from the same family or culture, we have a similar expectation. We think that those other people are going to be buying into those same boundaries and expectations, and therefore we don't have that communication. And actually, is that helpful? So right from the bat, that's why I keep saying I'm cutting to the chase. I don't want to fluff around any of this stuff because it is such a big topic. But what I do want to do is to offer you those 2 things of expectations and boundaries as being important for us to look at, and very often we then, in my experience, the conversation can then turn into what are expectations and boundaries, and the other person, what the other person should be doing, And actually, we need to take responsibility for ourselves around, this is what I will tolerate, this is what I won't tolerate, this is where my boundary is, this is where my boundary isn't, this is what's okay, this is what not okay, acceptable, these are my expectations. And start to have communications around that. But we can't do that with other people if we're not clear with them for ourselves. Does this make sense? Let me know with some thumbs and some hearts if this is making sense. Hi, Minnie. Yeah, let me know if this is making sense. So I think part of the challenge that we have is that for many of us, we've grown up with fairy tales or Hollywood versions of what we think relationships are or should be. I can't see who that is, but I can see some thumbs going across. So thank you, whoever that is. It's obviously making sense. But I think that we have these these filtered ways of looking at the world, and these expectations of things being in this Hollywood way of being, which isn't always appropriate for the life that we live and how that we relate. And it does take effort, and it takes effort on our part, let alone for somebody else. And that's what's important to understand. Shelley says it makes sense. And just thinking about what you have said, I do have expectations of my stepdaughter, and I find it difficult to communicate with her. Okay, so, well, actually, Shelley, this next bit then could lead into that. Because I think one of the things that surprises me, does it surprise me? Yeah, it does surprise me, because as human beings, we make a great deal of assumptions about things such as the word relationship or friendship or whatever it may be. And we assume that other people have the same meaning attached to it. And one of the practices that I do with a lot of clients is helping them get clarity. So, for example, I've had a lot of coaching sessions with people that have had challenging relationships with friends. And so my starting point is to ask people what they mean by friend. What is a friend? What does that mean to them? How does that show up? And we spend some time just jotting down some ideas. And quite often we end up with, or we start off with, fairly generic words such as supportive, kind, caring, those kinds of things. And they're great words, but I also encourage the person to dig down deeper about what does that actually mean? Because what I say supportive, you might use the same word, but you might have very, very different meaning about it. So we need to get clarity where that is concerned. And so often what happens is, once we start to dig down with those things of getting really clear as to what friendship is, or what does an intimate relationship mean, or what does a marriage mean, or what does a sibling relationship mean for you, once you've got that clarity, not this idealized view, but clarity on what that means for you, then you can start to see how the other person does or doesn't fit in with that. And also, how do you show up with that? Because I think very often, again, as human beings, the pattern that I see very often is that we displace things. We expect the other person to do stuff. We expect them to make the changes, and them to show up as a friend, for example. And yet, so often I take a step back and say, okay, well, these are your rules and expectations. But are you doing that? Are you turning up as a friend? Are you being friendly? So how I would relate that back to what the situation you're posing, Shelley, is actually sit down, if appropriate and where possible, and ask your stepdaughter what she needs from a stepmom. What are her expectations? And just listen to her. Just listen to her. Don't interrupt or question her, other than what would that mean, or how would that show up, and just get really clear, get a real clear picture from her as to what for her that role of stepmom would be. And that could be a conversation point, because very often in those kinds of roles, there's, I know when I was a stepmom, and I still, in some sense, still perceive myself slightly in that way. And did I get everything right? Absolutely not. But one of the things I found very useful, especially as I relaxed more into it, was I stopped putting pressure on the boys and wanted to learn from them. Okay, so what would that mean? And as they were going through, because they were preteen and then teenagers and then post-teen, what did that role mean to them? What did they need at that point? And it became a two-way communication, and me listening to them. And not that meant I then bent over backwards and gave them everything that they wanted, but it was about looking at how could I meet that need? How could I look at, actually that was not appropriate, or that was out of my jurisdiction, or whatever it may be. Is this making sense? But it was about communication, and so often with so much of what we talk about, that is the key, is that communication. But when we can get really clear for ourselves what we're expecting of the other person, but then checking in with ourselves as to how am I actually showing up? Am I showing up at the right time? And am I showing up in the right way too? You know, I've got this expectation of the other person to be a friend, or stepdaughter, or mum, or whatever the role is, and am I actually showing up in that way? You know, because I might want that other person to be friendly to me, but am I being friendly to them? Am I showing up in that way as a friend? So let me know. I saw some thumbs and hearts go across there. Shelley says it makes perfect sense. Brilliant, Shelley. The last thing that I wanted to add into this, and obviously if you're just joining, then please feel free to ask any questions, any thoughts, share any insights that you've had around relationships, or anything that you want to know. And the things that I'm sort of focusing on, because it's such a big topic and there are so many different angles that I could come in at this with, but I wanted to keep it so that it was accessible as a starting point. So the first thing really is around the clarity of your expectations. What do you expect of that relationship? And that's something I haven't really said as well, is that very often how I view relationships, whatever that relationship is that it's two individuals coming together, and the connection of those two individuals, in whatever capacity that may be, I think creates not a third being, but a third, a separate entity, for want of a better word. So there's you, and there's person A, and there's person B, and then there's the relationship is a separate thing, and it's what these two different people bring into that pot that creates that, and we both have to recognise that we play that, and as long as I'm clear on what my expectations are and what my boundaries are, and that if I want that person B to meet those expectations or know those boundaries, then I need to communicate that. I need to find the way to be able to communicate that. And to be able to get to that point, I need to be very clear for myself as to what a friendship is, for example, and check in as to whether I'm showing up in that way to this other entity, this other bit that's been created. And the last part of that for me is around us staying adult in our communication, which is not always easy, because often relationships will trigger past perceptions and memories for ourselves, which can then create all sorts of mini dramas and reactions that we're not aware of. So the more that we can stay adult, and that means sometimes listening to things that we don't want to listen to, hearing stuff we don't want to hear, facing into things, listening to somebody else's opinion which may be uncomfortable, not necessarily because they're critiquing us. I know that some people can find it extremely uncomfortable when somebody is giving them praise. So it is about staying adult, and this is where that listening side of things from the communication is so important. And one of the things that I use with clients is as a way for check-in with yourself, because those things that get triggered for us in relationship can happen so unconsciously. We don't have an awareness of them, and the reaction can happen within a nanosecond, and before we know it, we're saying stuff and doing stuff, and it's like we're not in control. So the more that you can take a deep breath with that and just check in with yourself. What age am I being right now? What the language that I'm using, the actions that I'm doing, what age is it coming from? Am I being the age that I am being, or has something happened that's triggered something internally for me and I've reverted to being a bit of a child, or being a teenager, whatever it may be. So that would be my sort of like final wrap around with that, is to check in with yourself as to what is the age that you're being at that moment in time. Hey Vicky, I'm joining late. Excuse me. From what I've heard, I can completely relate to this one in one area of my life. A few years ago, as I used to set my standards so high and expected everyone to be on the same as me, and when they didn't deliver, I became really disappointed. Thankfully, with the help I needed, I addressed this. And all is much better now. Brilliant. That's fantastic. And that's just a perfect example of how, when we have those high expectations, how it's not helpful to the other person, and it's certainly not helpful to you. Minnie says, I feel very isolated from friends. I tend to give a lot when I can, but I'm going through a lot of stuff, MH-wise, and it seems everybody is run for the hills. I don't want to let relationships die, but I want to protect myself. I guess I'm asking how to decide when relationships are not worth the emotional letdowns. Wow. Okay, Minnie. So I think first and foremost, I would invite you to sit down and look at what does relationship mean? What does friendship mean for you? And be as specific as you can. The more that you can write that down and get really, really clear of what that is, because very often we have these expectations of friends, and especially when we're going through challenges, and not everyone can deal with it. Not everybody has the strength or the capacity to be able to face into it. I know that there's a number of friends in the past year, when I've had the two significant deaths in my life. Obviously not my life, but with my friend dying and my dad passing away as well, is that I've got some friends who have really struggled with how do they deal with that? How do they be around me? How do they show up? And so I've had to check in with myself as to what are my expectations of them. And I can have that expectation of them, but actually, are they capable of it? That's without, I don't mean that in any judgmental way, but it's like the Einstein thing about putting the fish on the bike and expecting it to be able to learn to ride. That's not its strength. Or the monkey pulling the fish out of the river going, it's okay, I've got you, I'm saving you from drowning. It's like, hang on a second, there's this juxtaposition here. I can have these expectations of other people, but if they are not capable of meeting them, that's not their fault. That's my expectations aren't being directed in a way that's helpful. So get very clear on that. And then the second part within that is, as long as you have, which I believe that you do, have the all of the MH support that you need from a professional perspective in place. That's important, because sometimes your friends might need you to be a friend, and they might need to just go out and have a laugh or sit and watch your favourite movie or whatever it may be. They may not be in a position to be able to deal with all of the MH stuff themselves. So make sure that you've got that all from a professional perspective so that you can articulate that and feel connected with other people, being in groups like this, for example, and gives you the opportunity to have those conversations. Does that make sense, Minnie? Let me know if that makes sense. So I'm very conscious of time here this evening, which has flown by as per usual because it is such a big topic. But I suppose what would be helpful for me is that when I bring a big topic like this to the table, I'm sure it triggers thoughts for you in various different capacities. I want to ask about and have questions on, etc., etc. So if that's the case, then please do message me, because I can bring those questions together, and then we can do those. I don't have to mention your name, but it gives you the opportunity to be able to answer those questions, me to answer those questions if possible in a more direct way. Minnie says sort of. So what I would say, Minnie, is put you first in a respectful way, and recognise that one of the things that a lot of us do is that we give and we give and we give and we give, and we get annoyed with people who take and take and take and take, and it's like, well, I can get annoyed at you for taking, but actually I need to recognise that I'm the one doing the giving. And so by taking responsibility of just at this moment in time, you maybe haven't got anything to give in that capacity, put yourself first in a resourceful way so that you can get what you need from those professionals and from people who are able, friends that are able to be there for you and with you in that friend relationship way. I hope that clarifies a little bit more. So, I've overrun. Apologies. Anything else that you would like to ask or share, then please do comment below, because I obviously next week I won't be extending this, but because next week is an open forum anyway, so you can ask your question anyway in the open forum. But it is something we could do a part 2, and I could be more specific. So if you have got questions, please feel free to type things around. Please feel free to type things in so that we can look at them and address them in another way. Minnie says, I love it when you flip things and a light bulb goes on. You gave a fab way. You have a fab way with words. Thank you, Minnie. Well, hopefully that's made a bit more sense for you and give you something to work on. So yes, make sure that you, if you have your questions, type them in, whether it's you're watching on the recording or whether you have a light bulb moment afterwards, you can come back and type them in, and we can look at addressing those in other sessions. So as I've just said, next week is the open forum. Seriously, this brain. Open forum, so get your questions. You can message me beforehand if you want to with those questions, or you can put me on the spot. That's no problem at all. And remember that the movie Embrace I'm hosting in York with the wonderful support of York St John University. Please come and watch it this Wednesday evening. And if you bring, I know that there are a number of people who are bringing their daughters, who are bringing their friends, who are bringing their nieces, nephews, nieces. It's not just for women, but it is such it is, the content at the moment is directed at women, but it's such an important topic. And there's so many people that I know that have, this movie has been a catalyst for them. I know that every time I watch it, I get something different from it. So please do share the link. come and watch it again. There's a live Q&A with myself and one of the body image ambassadors, Kirsty, afterwards as well. So you can have a ask any of your questions there. So come along and join us on Wednesday night. The link is pinned. I'm pointing at the computer, but it's pinned below. Yeah, and I think that's it. I think that's a wrap. And I look forward to catching up with you next week. So take care. No, there won't be tickets on the door, Minnie. Will there be? If you can buy them beforehand, because obviously we need to know numbers. That is the key with it all, to be able to buy numbers, to be able to know the numbers. So if you can buy the tickets before, that would be fantastic. Yeah, there probably won't be tickets on the door. All right, my lovely. Well, thank you all for joining me this evening, and I look forward to seeing you Wednesday night at York St John University, and if not, next Monday night right here, same place, same time, 7 p.m. UK, and I'll see you then. Bye.